video, I'm going to show you an exercise that you can do to help release tension in your horse and also to help them to find a better posture or way of carrying their bodies. We're going to do what's called a pull release or a lateral release. But before we get into exactly how to do the exercise, we're going to talk a little bit about the pull. So the pull, as most horse people know, is this area right on top of the horse's head here. Now, what we're actually referring to when we talk about the horse's pull is a joint. And the joint we're referring to is where the horse's skull joins with the horse's first cervical vertebrae, which is also referred to as C1, cervical vertebrae 1, and that first vertebrae is also referred to as the atlas. So you'll hear me calling it the atlas quite a bit, or C1. We're talking about that first cervical vertebrae. So where the horse's skull connects to that first cervical vertebrae, that is the pull. That's what we're referring to when we talk about the horse's pull. That joint is also often called the Atlanto Occipital joint or the AO joint. Now, this joint is very important to your horse. If your horse is carrying tension in the pull, he's not going to be able to bend correctly. So you've probably heard about wanting your horse to bend around a circle so that he's balanced. But if your horse is tight in their pull, there's going to be tension through the rest of the body. And then the horse is going to be off balance and is going to have to compensate by carrying himself differently. And that's going to put strain on his body. Now, it's fairly common for horses to carry tension in their pull or their AO joint. They do this naturally as a way of just protecting that space. It is a vulnerable location on their body for them, so it's something that they want to protect. If a horse is nervous or feeling emotional, they're going to carry tension in that area. If a horse is dealing with any kind of physical discomfort or pain, they're likely going to carry tension in their AO joint. Or if the horse just has bad posture, he's likely going to carry tension in that joint as well. And just like a lot of people have bad posture, they've never learned how to really carry themselves in a healthy way. That can happen quite often with our horses as well. They just don't learn how to use their bodies in the most efficient way possible. But any kind of tension in that area is going to affect the whole rest of the horse. And as I said, if there's tension and the horse is not able to flex in the pull, that's going to affect the rest of the body, and he's not going to be able to bend correctly. So it's an important area to address. It's also going to affect the horse's posture and his ability to carry himself correctly. So you may have heard about the horse's power and energy coming from behind, the hind end coming up underneath the horse so that he can lift up and carry himself. Well, that's all very important, but if there's tension in the pull or in the rest of the top line, the horse isn't going to be able to bring his hind end underneath him and use that power the way that he needs to. So as I said, the pull is the joint between the horse's skull and the first cervical vertebrae. This is the joint that allows the horse to move his head up and down, much like I can move my hand up and down like this. So this joint creates the same motion in the horse's head. This joint also has a very small amount of sideways motion. The motion in the AO joint is limited. So there's a very small side-to-side motion. Much the same way I can only move my hand a small amount side to side. It's very similar in the AO joint. Most of when you see a horse bending quite a bit, that's coming from farther down in the neck. And we're going to see that in action as we start doing our releases. This is an exercise that I do very early on in my horse's training and frequently throughout their training process. It's something that you're never really done doing. Just like if you're going to do stretches for your own body, something that you always want to keep doing. I like to do it very early on in the training because it has such a huge impact on the horse, both mentally and physically, by helping them to release that tension that they may be carrying. It's definitely something that I want to do before I even think about sitting on my horse's back. I want to make sure that they have a good understanding of how to release laterally at that AO joint. Otherwise, I don't think they're ready to have a person on their back because they're not going to be able to support the rider the way that they need to, and it's only going to create more tension. All right, so we've learned that our horses commonly carry tension in their AO joint and that tension can affect the whole rest of the horse's body. Now we're going to learn what we can do to help release that tension. So when the AO joint is tense, the horse is going to be very braced and rigid in that area. So what we want to do is encourage movement and mobility within that joint. So as my friend and colleague Tom Nagel likes to say, correct movement releases brace. So by encouraging movement within the AO joint, we're going to help to release that tension and that brace in that area. So I've got Maya here, and you can see she is wearing a lovely cavesson. I really enjoy using my cavesson for work like this. The design of the cavesson allows me to use very precise communication with my horse versus using a typical halter. You can also see this center ring here where I have my line attached. Because this ring is located right in the center of her nose, you can imagine if I were to draw a line straight back, I'm going to come right directly centered to that AO joint. So this is going to give me a more precise way of communicating with her what I want from her because of the location right in the center of her nose here. Now you can do this exercise with any kind of halter, and I do that with some of my horses as well. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be looking to find mobility in that AO joint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my line pretty close to the end here, and I'm going to gently apply pressure. And Maya's done this exercise before, so you can see right away she released at her AO joint and brought her nose towards me with just a soft pressure on the line. Okay, and then right after she released at the AO joint, you may have noticed that she did a couple other things. She started licking and chewing, which is going to release her TMJ, located up here. Tension in the TMJ is also very common in horses, and like tension in the AO joint is going to affect the rest of their body. So that is another area that we want to try and release that tension so that the horse is soft and mobile in their jaw as well. And oftentimes when we release the tension in the AO joint, the horse also releases their TMJ. You may have noticed that she also then went and scratched her leg. that's another sign that she's releasing tension. So I went ahead and allowed her to do that. Some other things that you may see your horse do as they start to release tension is shake their heads, lick and chew, as I mentioned, rub on their leg, or they may feel like they need to start moving around. They may want to start walking around. I'm going to go ahead and allow all of those things to happen because it's the horse's way of releasing any stored up tension in their body. You'll also notice that after releasing her AO joint, she lowered her head, which then released the rest of her top line. Okay, now her head's come back up. You can see that we're in not a terrible posture, but I would say less than ideal if I were to ride her. Her head is up. She's a little bit dropped down onto her forehand. Her chest is dropped down. Her withers are dropped down. Her back is a little bit hollow. She's kind of in just, her typical posture when she's not doing anything. But when I want to go and ride her, I need to be able to lift her up so that she can support me while I'm riding her. So she needs to be able to lift through her thoracic sling, which is going to lift up her chest, to lift up her withers. She'll be able to use her abdominals, so lift up her back, and then that's going to allow the hind end to come underneath her. But before I can do any of that, I need to release the AO joint and therefore the rest of her top line, which is going to allow all that other stuff to happen. Okay, so let me show you that again. So again, I'm going to gently take my line and I'm going to put a very, very light pressure on the line. And then I'm just going to hold and wait. Now, if nothing happens, I may give a little vibration on that line. There you could see a little bit of movement over towards me. And that is about as much as we're looking for. Remember, the movement in the AO joint is very small. Okay, I'm going to come around to her other side here. And I'm going to ask for the same thing in the other direction. Very light pressure. If nothing happens, I may put a little vibration on the line. Almost as if my hand were shivering in the cold. And there we got a little release. And again, it's a very small movement that we're looking for. Now, Maya's still holding a little bit of tension, as you can see. She's a pretty easily distracted horse and kind of a nervous horse in general. So there's some noises going around outside that she's listening to. She's kind of doing what I want, but I haven't really gotten the full release that I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do, let's see if I can move her here a little bit so you guys can see. I'm going to just gently ask her to release her pull so that there she released to the left. And then now I'm going to ask her to release to the right. Just very gentle pressure, maybe a little vibration. And then we're going to spook at something. That's okay. So this is a great time to ask her to release her pull. There we go. That's it. You notice that when she did spook right away, her head came up, her neck got tight. There's a nice release to the right. We're going to come back to the left now. I'm just going to gently ask her to go side to side until I start to feel her soften into my contact. I want to feel like I'm able to easily rock her head side to side. Right now it's still feeling like there's a little bit of bracing, a little bit of resistance. So I know there's still some tension there. You might even grab directly onto the ring and just gently rock her head side to side. You may notice that one side, there we go, that one side is harder than the other. We're starting to think about relaxing, but not quite sure we want to yet. So I need to be super patient with this. This is not something that I can force. And if I try to force it, I'm only going to create more tension, okay? If I just pull her head, I could easily pull her head over to the side. But if I did that, she'll bend through the rest of her neck farther down, but she won't necessarily release her AO joint. She's still going to be carrying tension, and then she's not going to be balanced correctly through her body. She's not going to be able to release her top line the way that she needs to, okay? So this is not something that you can force, and if you try, it's not going to work. You're only going to create more tension. So I'm thinking more about guiding her into the movement through gentle pressure, almost like if I were going to gently put my hand on your shoulder to guide you in a certain direction. Very soft, gentle pressure. I'm never thinking about forcing, and I'm never thinking about rushing. Takes as long as it takes. Now Maya also can really go inwards when she becomes nervous. So I'm noticing that I'm not seeing a lot of blinking right now. And that's something I know with her means she's kind of checked out. So this movement in her pull is going to hopefully help to bring her back to me a little bit and help her reconnect to me. If she wants to move a little, I'm going to let her do that. Sometimes I'll also take my hand just on each side of the horse's head. This is how I usually do it if I'm using a regular halter, and just gently rock the horse's head side to side between my hands. There we go. So there she lowered and released a little. Of course, she didn't maintain it for very long because she got distracted and her head came up again. And that will often happen as you're working with your horses, especially if you do have a more nervous type horse. It feels vulnerable for them to release at their AO joint. So they need to feel safe and they need to trust you, or they're not going to willingly give you that release. So we're going to see what we can do again here. That was a little nicer. So I'm just gently rocking her head side to side. And I'm going to think about, there we go. So there's the nice release that we're looking for. So she released at her AO joint, and then that carried through the rest of her top line as she released all the way through her neck and down through her back. So that's awesome. That's what we're looking for. And then we lose it again as she gets distracted. That's okay. We're going to ask for it again. Every time we lose it just means it's another opportunity to practice. And just gently rocking her head side to side. It's a very small motion. My mentor, Patrick King, likes to say, you're just tipping her head eyelashes one way, eyelashes the other way. Eyelashes to the left, and then eyelashes to the right. Very small motion. She's starting to get a little softer in her eye, which is a sign that she's starting to release. She's not quite feeling as soft as I would like her in that AO joint. I'm still feeling resistance when I put that gentle pressure. Now, if I'm feeling a lot of resistance and we're not really able to work through it, I might try a couple of things. Sometimes I'll just take the horse for a little walk. Sometimes just moving around a little bit is going to help kind of reset the horse. So we're just going to kind of go for a little walk here and let her move around. And then we're going to try it again. Oh, that's better. Okay. There's a nice big breath. That's another sign that we're releasing tension. Maya is a chronic breath holder, so whenever I hear those nice big breaths, I really like that. There we go. Now you'll see that she lengthens through her top line and begins to reach her neck and therefore her nose forward, down, and out. And later on, this is what's going to allow us to bring our horse into an on the bit position. But we need to get the release of the top line first before we can start to ask the horse to engage and come into more of a working position. We got some more licking and chewing there, which is awesome. So now that she's in a more relaxed position, I'm going to see how she feels again. So now we're starting to feel a little softer, where I can start to feel like it's a little easier for me to rock her head side to side. Oh, and then we get distracted. Noises outside. Now, another thing that I might do if I'm feeling a lot of tension, a lot of bracing, I'm having a hard time getting the horse to release, I'm having a hard time getting that mobility in the AO joint, I might take a finger and just gently tickle the corner of her lip here. And what that's going to do is stimulate her to lick and chew. Now, she's pretty braced today. There we go. Now, when we get the licking and chewing, remember that's going to release the TMJ joint, which is going to help to release the pull. So it can work both ways. I can release the pull, the AO joint, and that can release the TMJ, or I can release the TMJ, and then that'll help to release the AO joint. So if I'm noticing that there's a lot of tension and I'm just not getting anywhere by trying to release the AO joint, again, I might just stick my finger into the corner of her mouth here and kind of give her a little tickle until I get some licking and chewing. And again, Maya's carrying quite a bit of tension today. I can even feel it in her mouth. She's not softening to my touch in her mouth. There we go. One thing that you do want to be aware of as you're doing these lateral releases, and these are some signs that are going to help you know if your horse is releasing correctly. You want to watch and make sure that the ears stay level with each other. So You watch as Maya releases. Her ears are still level. So as she moves back and forth, her ears stay level. You'll also notice, let me move her to the side here a little so you can see this better. You'll notice that as the horse releases, the jaw is going to tuck into the throat latch area a little bit. That jaw just kind of slides right on in there. If you notice that the ears are not staying level and the nose and the jaw is sticking out more, so that's a side view of it. From the front, it'll look something like this. If you notice that that is happening, that is a sign that your horse is still carrying tension in that AO joint. And what he is doing is, instead of releasing and moving at the AO joint, he's rotating his head at C1 and C2, that joint in between C1 and C2. That joint is what allows for the rotation for the horse to turn his head sideways. So if you notice that that's happening, where the horse's head is tipping so that one ear is lower than the other and his jaw starts to stick out, that's a sign that he's still carrying tension in that AO joint. And he hasn't released it there, but is again rotating at the joint between C1 and C2. That joint is also called the AA joint or the Atlanto Axial joint. And that's because C1, remember, is called the atlas, and C2 is called the axis. So the joint between the atlas and the axis is the Atlanto Axial joint. Also the joint between C1 and C2. Okay, so just something to watch out for as you're doing this exercise with your horse. Again, if you see that happening, just means that he's still carrying tension in the AO joint. So now that we've done some work with Maya, let's give it another try and see how she's feeling. So she's feeling much softer. I'm able to very easily guide her head from side to side. So we're carrying a lot less tension than we were at the start of the session. Very easily able to get those lateral releases, even with her in an elongated posture. So you can see the difference in Maya's posture here now versus where we were at the start of the session. She's released through her top line. She's a lot softer in her neck. We don't have the bracing going on there. Her jaw is released. Might be a little hard to see on the video, but her eye is a lot softer. She's more connected with me. So mentally and emotionally, she's in a better state now. She's also physically carrying herself in a better way. So she's released the tension in her body. Her neck is nice and soft now. Her back is nice and soft. And now, if I were to ask her to, she would be in a position where she could lift up through her thoracic sling. Oh, there's a yawn. That's another great sign of releasing. And especially with this horse, I don't see yawns too often, so I really like when I see those. Oh, and then we get distracted. So she's now in a position where she could lift up through her thoracic sling, lifting up her chest, lifting through her withers, lifting up her back, bringing her hind end underneath her, and carrying herself in a healthy way. So if you found this interesting, I'm also going to be doing videos showing how to do this lateral release in movement. So you can actually do the same release while the horse is walking, trotting, or cantering. And it's going to have a similar effect where it's going to release tension and help them release through their top line, which is then going to enable them to carry their body in the way that they need to be most effective and most comfortable while you're working with them, whether it's on the ground or under saddle. So I'll be doing that video, as well as a video showing how to do the same lateral release using the bit and bridle. And you can do that both from the ground and then also while you're riding the horse. So those videos will be coming up shortly. Those will be available in our virtual classroom. So if you're not already a member of that, we'd love to have you join us. It's a simple monthly subscription, and it gives you access to our entire library of videos on a wide variety of topics, from groundwork, horse care, liberty training, dressage training, in-hand work, ridden exercises, horse theory lessons, and more. There's a lot of great information there, as well as you get access to our private Facebook group where we have a community of like-minded people. So I'll leave a link for that. And again, we'd love to have you join us. And thank you again for joining me again here today. And if you have any questions or comments, make sure to let me know.